I guess Vince and Bongino are out somewhere together. Is that what I'm to assume? I don't. Did everybody take today off? I showed up. How are you? Maybe we haven't met yet. My name's Chris Stigall. If you're wondering where's Vince, I don't know. I was called in off the bench. Glad to be here, though. Always appreciate the invitation, and always cool to hang out with you, my second radio family, here on WMAL. I do a morning show down the street there in Philadelphia, not too far down the road. You might know Philadelphia as home to the NFC East champs and the NFC champs of last year. Sorry, too soon? You know how to reach us, 888-630-9625. Now, I've started off on a bad foot. All right, how about this? Larry Hogan is not running for president. See, now we've all come back together. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Love to hear from you today. By the way, if you're free and you'd like to, join me over at my website, chrisstigall.com. That's Stigall. That's where you can join me on Substack, my daily newsletter. I'm going to publish a new one today. I do it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's called the Harumph Society. I love it. I'm having the best time of my life over there at the Harumph Society. I do deep dive conversations on subjects that maybe I don't always get time to talk about on my radio show, or maybe I don't get to talk about on my podcast. It's best of all, it's a chance to, it's troll-free. There are no trolls. I don't allow it. I police it as a benevolent dictator. There's absolutely no chance whatsoever that haters and trolls come over. So really smart, great dialogue has been going on over there. I do some giveaways with regularity, too, and it's just a great chance to get to know each other better. So that's the Harumph Society. It's at Substack, or you go to chrisstigall.com, and you can follow me there, or on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest. Twitter, which, by the way, is going to switch to X, I guess. They're getting rid of the bird. They're getting rid of the blue. They're going to go black, and they're going to go to X soon. So we're all going to be pirates, I guess. Love to catch up with you today, or if there's something you want to say to me here on the, if you can't make the phone call, then you can always tweet at me too, and I'll see it that way. So former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan makes the announcement he's not running for president, at least not as a Republican. This from Politico. On a third-party ticket, the moderate Marylander has left the door cracked open. It's something he said he would continue to talk about as worth trying. Yesterday, he said he thinks that you got to run the race to see what it would look like. So, you Marylanders in the audience, moderate Larry Hogan running as an independent. How would that work for you? Has he got a shot? Do you see a path? I'm trying to ask without laughing. At 888-630-WMAL. Right now, the co-chair of the centrist political organization No Labels is focused on getting the Republican Party on track and trying to nominate a good Republican that can do a better job and could potentially win a race in November, he told Jen Psaki yesterday. But he didn't shut down the questions about the possibility he might eventually join the race. I said that if no one wants the candidate A or candidate B, then maybe there will be a candidate C. Hogan also touted his popularity among voters across the political spectrum. He said, I finished my 8 years as governor with a 77% approval rating, highest in the country. It was over 70% with Democrats, independents, and Republicans. Of course, I'm not well known across the country, he says, but you've got to run a race to see what it's going to look like. Okay, well, I mean, he says that you people in Maryland loved him. So it would be a shame if he did not get into the race to expose the rest of the country to this man you loved so much. You agree with that? Right now, he said more voters are open to backing a third-party ticket than in previous years. A recent Quinnipiac poll found that 47% of voters would consider supporting a third-party candidate. Now, this is always interesting to me, particularly when you have a Republican field that's as crowded as this one is. Let's just be honest. These people are running as Trump spoilers. That, or they have absolutely no respect for the rest of the field, you can only conclude. I mean, Listen, if you look at the entirety of the Republican field right now and you're Larry Hogan and you say, I think I'm going to jump in as an independent, what you're saying is you don't like the entirety of the field? You don't like Tim Scott? You don't like DeSantis? You don't like Nikki Haley? You don't like Chris Christie? Or Vivek Ramaswamy? Or that guy that's giving everybody $20 for every dollar they get? What are there, a dozen Republicans? Are you saying you, Larry Hogan, are so popular in Maryland, you've convinced yourself that what the Republican Party needs and the Republican voters want, there's not enough choice? No, I don't think that's actually what he's saying. I think he's like Chris Christie, don't you? He doesn't even really anticipate winning necessarily. He knows where the Republican Party seems to be headed again, and it bothers him. So he's leaving the door open to jump in to try to stop Trump, be a Trump spoiler. That's what he wants. Right now, he said more voters are open to backing a third-party ticket, and the potential for a strong third-party ticket has shaken Democrats, who worry a no-labels-backed bid would hurt Joe Biden's re-election chances and potentially send the current Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump, back to the White House. Hogan pushed back against that yesterday. He said, we have a third-party candidate now, the Green Party candidate, pulling about 4 or 5% completely away from Biden. So if you want to talk about a spoiler, they should focus in on Cornel West, or they should focus in on people that are pulling 30% of the people away in a primary. No labels just has an idea that maybe if we get to this point where nobody in America wants the Republican or Democrat, they might run a ticket. We don't know who they are yet. We don't know who they'd pull from or whether it would be a Republican or Democrat. Now, the other guy that's talking about this, potentially leaving the door open, is Joe Manchin. And here's how the conventional wisdom goes. I just saw some numbers over the weekend that say the approval ratings, the net negative approval ratings for both Biden and Trump head-to-head are pretty astronomical. Let me see if I can find that quick. I wasn't going to talk about this, but bear with me, folks. Let me see if I can find it. Yes. Pew Research, according to their polls, and again, I need to read the sample size on this. Sorry, reading this on the fly. This is of adults, U.S. adults. So I'm a little dubious of the sampling. Whenever you read polls, as you know, that sample U.S. adults, what does that mean? That means any knuckle-dragger with an opinion. Excuse me, sir. Yeah? What do you think of Joe Biden? I don't like him. And what do you think of Trump? I don't like him. And have you ever voted in your life? Nope. That guy counts in this poll. Okay, so whenever you see polls of adults, be cautious. Having said all that, Pew Research of adults says Biden's favorability is 39%, Biden's unfavorability 60%, Trump's favorability 35%, unfavorable 63%. So Biden's unfavorables have grown by 5 percentage points since July in this same poll. Trump's are up 3. I've asked this rhetorically a couple of times already this week or this morning when I was doing my morning show. If half the country believes that Donald Trump's a crook and a felon and, 3-4 times indicted by the time there's an election, if you believe that, you believe that. There's no talking you out of it. Similarly, for those of us that know the Biden family is corrupt and that they're crooks, it poses an interesting scenario, doesn't it? Half the country firmly entrenched in the belief that Donald Trump's a criminal. Not my words. I'm just saying it's undeniable. You've got a whole swath of this country that believes that in their heart of hearts, and they're never going to be moved off of it, no matter the evidence. And then there are the rest of us who've been paying attention to the news and know the Bidens are crooks. So what do you do there? You're at sort of an impasse. It's like they're not going to be moved. We're not going to be moved. So you go for this almighty unicorn called the middle. I don't know how many centrists or middle people there are on Trump versus Biden. I mean, how many people are just sitting out there going, gosh, I don't know if it's Trump versus Biden. I don't really know how I'm going to vote. I don't believe that person really exists, at least not en masse. And so Here's what people like Larry Hogan and people like Joe Manchin are thinking. Here's what the No Labels crew thinks. They think there's a third path. They think they can Ross Perot it, and that this might be the year that a good number of Democrats and Republicans would peel off, as well as those centrists out there, whoever the hell they are, and would vote for them instead. This is what they tell themselves, or at least tell you and me. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Joe Biden and or Donald Trump are both so disliked by the bases of their parties, somebody like Larry Hogan of Maryland, and I'm specifically talking to you Marylanders, somebody like Larry Hogan could walk in and fill the breach? 888-630 WMAL. Let me jump right into it. Al. Al's a Marylander. All right, your distinguished former governor, Al. You love him. Everybody loves him, according to him. So what kind of third-party candidate would he make? Welcome in.
Well, I was saying I think he'd be an absolute natural to run in a third party, and he could maybe even have Mitt Romney as his VP choice, and they could just simply call it the Turd Party.
The Turd Party, like the natural. 30 Point Buck. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think they'd be fantastic. No, nobody is looking for Larry Hogan. I was going to say Harry Logan, but yeah, no, nobody's looking for Larry. Nobody was looking for Larry when he was here. Nobody liked being, saddled with Larry. I'm sorry, Larry, but nobody's looking for this.
So he's doing a bit of romanticizing, huh? He's lying to himself. The fondness for
you were nailing it right before I got on the phone with you, my friend. They make themselves more important than they are.
Al, thank you. There's the first Marylander right out of the gate. How about in Clinton, Merv? Hey, Merv, what do you say?
Man, I'm a Val. Absolutely not. There's no way we would go for him. I mean, you see which way we went. Maryland just went with Wes Moore. They went the exact opposite of Hogan now. There's no way.
What do you think of this notion, Merv? Everybody, this is not my opinion. I'm just saying there's this narrative that everybody hates Biden, everybody hates Trump, and so that's why it's the perfect time for somebody like Larry Hogan. What do you say? What do you say?
When Donald Trump walks into a UFC fight and you've got 18,000 people start chanting USA, I've never really seen politicians, get that. Trump is the only person that gets that. So
you don't believe this storyline that you don't. Yeah, I was going to say you don't believe this storyline that he's loathed and despised.
Absolutely not. Only on the left. Only on the left.
All right. Thank you, Merv. Appreciate it. In Manassas, Rick is next. Rick, do you have the Hogan fever?
I have a prediction if Hogan enters. He's going to do to Joseph Robinette Biden crime family what Ross Perot did to George Bush during the Clinton 88 election. That's my prediction. Hogan is not going to suck any Republican votes. I don't care what he calls himself. If he's anything, he's a leftist rhino. There is no way. I don't see Manchin getting in. I think he'll be a pariah in the Democratic Party, not in Virginia, but he'll lose any support in the Senate for any election money out of Schumer or anybody that tends to run the Senate. That's my prediction.
And he will what then? Just drop out? Do you think he'll run for Senate again? Because if he's in trouble for that Senate seat, in West Virginia.
I agree with that, but I don't think he's in as much trouble as the prevailing wisdom. He's going to get a lot of Republican votes because I don't see another Republican being supported over there by Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has not done a good job putting money in the right places in the Senate, and I think that's to Joe Manchin's advantage.
Rick, I'm grateful for your call. Thank you. Chris Stigall in for Vince today. Let's go to Southern Maryland, talk to Steve. Hey, Steve, what do you say about your former governor? He thinks he's the bee's knees, man. He's the answer.
Yeah, right. No. He was
You're not buying it.
And Republican clothing, excuse me. Did nothing for the state, kowtowed to the Democrats. I mean, it just amazes me. I mean, he's another Chris Christie. I mean, It amazes me that this man thinks that he's going to do something.
All right. Well, Steve, I appreciate the call. That's if my sample, now granted, I guess I sampled an audience much like Pew did. That was just a random sampling of adults. But my polling says an overwhelming no thanks from Marylanders to their former governor, Larry Hogan. You can come on in, 888-630-9625. Again, my name's Chris Stigall today, in for Vince. Glad to be here. Yeah, I mean, if you're into that sort of thing. Mwah. Love you, Lair. Chris Stigall in for Vince Coglianese today. I have the distinction, I think I've told this audience before, if you're familiar when I visited, I happen to have the distinction of being your morning guy, Larry O'Connor's best man. I actually watched him get married to a woman. I witnessed it. It's real. Our telephone number, 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. You Marylanders, I have to say, so far, if my snap poll is any indication, former Governor Larry Hogan going on with Jen Psaki saying he may run as a third-party ticket, that maybe the country is clamoring for Hogan. So far, no takers. Let's see if Mary in Annapolis thinks differently. Hey, Mayor, welcome in.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. What do you think about this?
I think Larry Hogan is a legend in his own mind, and I'm a survivor here in Annapolis of lockdown Larry's tyrannical mandates and arbitrary policies, and he basically kicking the can to every leftist leader here in Maryland, and basically. No Republican or conservative is interested in voting for Larry. We are happy to get rid of him. He is a big reason why Westmore became governor. He did not support in fact, he attacked the Republican nominee, viciously attacked him, as he does anybody that disagrees with him, because he's a very thin-skinned man. And
that sounds familiar. In fact, Jim, Mary, I got to run to break, but that sounds very familiar. Another Republican governor with thin skin who attacks fellow Republicans. His name's Chris Christie. Thick as thieves. I know Jim was going to say the same thing. Quick break for news here on WMAL. Great to be with you this afternoon. It's a Monday in the big town. Vince out today. My name's Chris Stigall, filling in. Thrilled to be along for your ride, hopefully to the conclusion of your day and your way home, or wherever you're headed, maybe in. 888-630-9625 is how you reach me. 888-630 WMAL. Came across a piece in Newsmax over the weekend, authored by Morgan Murphy, who is Senator Tommy Tuberville's former national security advisor, retired Navy captain. It was headlined, "Expect Senator Tuberville to hold on and continue these military officers in holding, basically, hanging in limbo, debating over taxpayer-funded abortion, not backing down, Tommy Tuberville. And if that means the Joint Chiefs chair on down does not get confirmed, some 250 generals and admirals hang in the balance right now because of Senator Tuberville." And this editorial, I know there are a lot of security experts. I know there are a lot of Defense Department folks that listen to WMAL. So this is a subject that's of big interest to a lot of you, I know. And Morgan Murphy, as a retired Navy captain and Senator Tuberville's former national security advisor, he had quite a bit to say about it. I thought he would make for an interesting conversation today. So, Mr. Murphy, I welcome you to WMAL.
Hey, Chris, call me Morgan.
Glad to have you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us your perspective, which, as you've made clear in your Newsmax piece, and the senator has too, this will not, he's not going to relent. He's not folding.
No, I mean, he is a principled person, which is rare in Washington, D.C., and he's not going anywhere. You really hit the nail on the head. What's lacking is just basic retail politics, which is just basic talking to each other. Senator Tuberville, back in August, this time last year, along with 12 other Republicans, sent the Secretary of Defense a letter saying, hey, explain this policy you're about to drop. You're hinting that lack of availability of abortion is going to affect readiness. What do you mean? The Secretary of Defense didn't respond. So Tuberville sent him another letter in October and another one in December, and he just didn't respond to any of them. Now, this is a co-equal branch of government. He sits on the Oversight Committee asking the Secretary of Defense basic questions about his policy, and he just chose to ignore the senator. And that's what you're seeing from the president, too. He's like, no, I'm not going to talk to him. And if you don't have people talking to each other in Washington, you're not going to get solutions.
Morgan, how does this work? He needs, as you write, he needs just one Democrat on the Armed Services Committee to swing in his favor, and that might even be a guy who's been rumored to challenge Biden in the primaries, Joe Manchin.
Oh, yeah. Now, this puts Joe Manchin in a terrible position because for 40 years in this country, we have had bipartisan agreement on taxpayer funding of abortion. A lot of folks say, well, you know, this is an extreme position on abortion. No, it's not. For 40 years, the United States has followed the Hyde Amendment. The DOD is governed by another code, separate code, but it's code U.S. 1093 that prohibits taxpayer funding of abortion. We've all agreed on that. The Biden administration injected domestic politics into our DOD, and you've seen it in lots of other areas, not just abortion. But what this is going to do is it forces, you know, the Armed Services Committee just needs one vote from the other side. It might be, it could be Joe Manchin. It could even be Tim Kaine, who is actually pro-life there in Virginia. But it puts Manchin in particular in a bad spot because he's running for re-election. And he's in a state that right now, Jim Justice, the popular Republican governor of West Virginia, is 20 points ahead, theoretically.
And I have to laugh when I hear Biden say the idea of injecting domestic social politics into the Department of Defense bill. I mean, setting abortion aside for a minute, we've seen this trans agenda, this LGBTQ madness, squarely injected into our Defense Department, have we not?
Oh, absolutely, right out of the gate. I mean, 4 days after taking office, Joe Biden said, you know, trans folks can join the military. You know, you can have you can have a host of hormone blockers and have the government pay for your gender reassignment surgery at $30,000 a pop, but you can't have flat feet in Joe Biden's army. It's complete garbage. That was 4 days in.
Yeah.
And less than 2 weeks in, the new Secretary of Defense, who Coach voted for, by the way, it tried to be very amicable with the administration. But less than 2 weeks in, the Secretary of Defense declared what's called a stand down, which meant every member of the Department of Defense, I mean everybody from 4-star general to rank seaman, had to go through 4 hours of anti-extremism training, a lot of which folks found very insulting because the training itself insinuated that service members were racist, were Nazis, were white supremacists, et cetera, et cetera. So it really alienated a lot of the force. That was 2 weeks in.
Morgan Murphy is Senator Tuberville's former national security advisor. He's a retired Navy captain himself. Can you speak broadly, Morgan, to the extent that you know? I'm sure you have many colleagues who are either still serving or you're certainly close to people who are in still. I hear specifically about the Navy. Numbers are quite low. Capabilities are quite diminished. I've heard very specifically the Navy, from my understanding, is not... if you want, this is probably my term, not an appropriate term, war ready, that we're just very depleted in both rank and numbers, physical numbers, as well as equipment. What do you know of that? Is that accurate?
Well, there are two major areas pressing on the United States military. The first, and you're touching on it, is recruiting. So without new people joining, the old guys are getting out, right? And without new people joining, you you've got a real problem. Where is the next generation of people joining our military? Now, since 1973, the United States has had an all-volunteer force. We haven't had the draft. We haven't, forced anybody to defend our nation because we have this all-volunteer. Because every year we've got a bunch of young men and women, brave patriots, who stand up. They put their hand in the air, and they say they are pledging their very lives to protect and defend the Constitution. Last year, the Army missed their recruiting number for the first time in 50 years. It never happened before. They missed their recruiting number by 15,000 recruits. Now, to put that in perspective, that's an entire division. That was 25% of their recruiting number. This year, you're right, the Navy's on track to miss it, so we're going to miss it by 10,000. I think the Army's going to miss it by 15,000 again. The Air Force has reported they're going to miss their recruiting numbers by 6,000. These numbers, for people who love the military, for people who watch these things, are staggering. We've just never seen anything like this before. Where are our young Americans who've been there for 50 years? What are they doing? Why aren't they joining? That's a readiness issue. That is the true readiness issue. And I think the administration's only too happy to yell at, these Republicans as obstructionists, to say that they're injecting domestic politics into the Pentagon. They're only too happy to do that, but because behind the curtain, man, they are missing recruiting left and right. And it's putting our national security at risk.
And I'm told by people who have served with distinction, such as yourself, that if young people are coming up to you and saying, hey, should I enlist right now, given the state of things, many of you veterans are saying, I would not recommend it. I can't recommend it in good conscience. I've heard many distinguished service personnel say that to me who have since retired. What do you say?
I mean, what I would say to any I love the Navy, I love our country, and I love this military. And as my mom always said, this too shall pass. We're going to get out of this mess. We're going to get a new president. So I would encourage any young person that the military is a wonderful career full of very fine people. But you're right. There are, I'm a veteran of Afghanistan. I watched the president's wholesale surrender of 20 years of blood and treasure to the Taliban, leaving them $85 billion worth of our equipment. Leaving them the bragging rights of humiliating the world's greatest superpower. Left them in a much stronger position than they were when we invaded in 2001. So I watched that, and it was a gut punch. It was a gut punch to everybody I know who served. And the military is a family business. The number one correlation for military service is not your income. It's not your race. It's not where you live. It is if you had a family member who served. It's a family business. So when an uncle or an aunt at Thanksgiving is saying, gosh, my military service feels like a waste, those I know who served and were injured or died, where did all that go? Gosh, that is a tough conversation to have with a young person who's thinking about joining. So it's a real problem.
Yeah, and I don't know to what extent you've spoken with, I know you don't speak for Senator Tuberville. I don't mean to put you in that place, but given your time talking with him, is you look at something like Ukraine, and with your expertise and time served, how do you view it? Because a lot of Americans, I think, feel like, how does this end? When does this end? And they just hear leaders in Washington say, as long as it takes, as much as it takes, whatever they want, endlessly. Yeah. And most Americans don't agree with that.
I don't think Tommy Tuberville would mind me saying, when we first began talking about Ukraine, I mean, he visited before it was invaded. We first began talking about Ukraine. We failed before the first shot was fired. We failed in deterrence. That's what our military is for. Is why Teddy Roosevelt said, speak softly, carry a big stick. The idea is to have a big military so you don't get into a fight. So the Biden administration failed that. I mean, Afghanistan really set the table there for every third world dictator and tyrant to say, well, we got a weak guy on the watch now in Washington. Now's the time to go. So Putin looked at Biden and said, it's go time. But your question of involvement in the Ukraine is one, what you have to weigh it. Like, is a country, a small country on the border with Russia, directly on the border with Russia, worth the life of a young man from Philadelphia, a young man from my hometown of Birmingham, a young woman that never have a family or see her children again? I mean, these are questions that senators should be asking themselves. I know they are questions that Senator Tuberville asked. What are the strategic national interests for the United States in Ukraine? That is a fair question for the American people to ask. And sadly, it's not one that we've had a debate on in this country. We have not had a robust debate on it. Are we ready to get in a war with Russia? I would argue that we are in a war with Russia. Now, this causes vapors on the Hill. No, we're not. No, we're not. Well, if your enemy thinks they're at war with you, and the Russian people do, 90% of the Russian people believe they're at war with the United States, my friend, you're at war.
Yeah. Yeah, and and Biden continues to make these overtures, flirting with Ukraine joining NATO. It's the one thing Russia, above all else, has said, don't do this, you're provoking. It's like we just continue to provoke them. That doesn't make you a Putin stooge or a Russian sympathizer to understand what is a provocation to them. It seems like we're actively provoking Russia. It seems to me.
Well, you've got two opposing thoughts in your brain at the same time, Chris. I mean, how can you do this?
Morgan,
you possibly hold two thoughts. Like you must be pro-Ukraine or you're anti-Putin.
Yeah.
No, I mean what Russia's done and is it's horrible.
Yes.
It's the death of thousands of people, the utter destruction of once decent economy, and they've become the pariah of the world, is suffering for the Russian people too. So, carte blanche, that's horrible. At the same time, it's a small country on their border that has aligned itself with Europe and particularly the United States. Putin said in 2007 that this is a red line, and he said, I'll wreck the country before I let it be an anti-Russia satellite. How is that different than what we did in this country to Cuba? Yep. When Cuba said, I'm going to align itself, was going to align itself with the Soviet Union, we invaded the Bay of Pigs. We tried to kill Fidel Castro. We have led a 70-year economic blockade of the place. I mean, we have tried to crush Cuba every which way to Sunday. When I say this to my friends who are very pro-Ukraine, there's long silences, Chris.
Morgan Murphy is Senator Tommy Tuberville's former national security advisor. He's written a piece at Newsmax, which is worth reading if you haven't yet. It's headlined, Alabama supports Senator Tuberville for halting military promotions over wrong piece. Excuse me. Senator Tuberville's holds expect them to. You support that, but expect these holds on military officers to continue. Incidentally, the Joint Chiefs Chair, if confirmed, named Charlie Brown. I just adore that because the imagery, quite frankly, of a football being pulled away by Lucy is exactly right. That just it feels just about right to have a Joint Chiefs Chair named Charlie Brown. But that's for another conversation. I'm sure he's a good man with just an unfortunately ill-timed name.
His staff's going to make that joke, I'll tell you what.
Thank you, Morgan. Glad to be with you today. Chris Stigall in for Vince Coglianese. You can follow along. Just posted today my brand new newsletter. I do it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I call it the Harumph Society at Substack. Quite frankly, the most awesome people hang out there. You will love the people there. If you and I haven't had the chance to meet yet, or you haven't met some of the folks that traditionally listen to my show, which is down the road in Philadelphia, my podcast too, if you don't listen to many podcasts or you're looking for something to listen to when you're not listening to WMAL, I hope you'll check it out. Go to chrisstigall.com and you can find all of it there. Let me go to John in Fairfax County. John, I'm sure glad you called. Chris in for Vince today. Hi.
Hey, Chris. Look, thank you so much for stepping in. I always enjoy when you do. Hey,
thank you, sir.
My only point here is, the military doesn't sell itself anymore. I mean, that's pretty clear when we start to talk about recruitment anymore. I grew up with the generation and that iconic commercial from the Army. We do more before, 9 a.m. before most people do in a day. And I come from 3 generations of military service. And my oldest son graduated university in the IT field and so forth and so on. And he did contemplate about military service, but the private sector just gave him a deal you just can't turn away, and he is often heading towards working with a particular large defense industry contract right now in support of a warfighter, by the way. And so I think this whole idea about the generational issues, about other factors, social issues, and all those kinds of things, it's just my opinion, having served in Kuwait, Somalia, Haiti, that it has come to a point now we've got to do a better job at recruiting from a advertising position.
Roger that, John. I appreciate you, my brother. Thank you so much for your service. I got to run the news. Grateful for your perspective on WMAL.